So thank you for coming, everybody, from all around the world. We're back again. And the things that I want to talk about it a little bit, the facts that Generation Z or Zoomers or digital natives are people born in the early 90s to the end of the first decade of the 21st century, with the strong need for interaction, being always connected to the internet. Given these characteristics, the teaching and learning process must adapt to the needs of this generation. It is essential to bring interactive methodologies, improve and encourage communication, and position the person as the protagonist of their own story. Therefore, entrepreneurial education is seen as the main way for this group of young people to have a complete education. It works in the development of skills, essential skills and abilities aimed at the labor market without neglecting the development of socio-emotional characteristics. In our organization, Slovenian Global Business Network, we truly believe that we should not only focus on the older, more experienced generations of entrepreneurs, but we should also focus on and learn from this Generation Z. And at today's event, we are especially honored to host our youngest member, a Zoomer and entrepreneur, Ms. Rhea Klanšek, born Slovenian, and at age 7, moved together with her mom/mentor, an older brother, to United States. She grew up between New York and Silicon Valley. And currently, she lives in Slovenia, where she is pursuing a Master's of Business Informatics at School of Economics and Business, University of Ljubljana, and second Master's in Portugal. Thank you so much, Rhea, for accepting this invitation as our speaker today. I'm very happy to have you here with us and sharing your life path, traveling around the world and business experiences at such a young age. You're a true example. Thank you. You're welcome. Mateja Perovšek-Čekin is my name, and I'm the Executive Director of Slovenian Global Business Network and host of our monthly program, Slovenian Businesswomen Around the World. From lecturer, researcher, film editor, judge on science festival to panelist, Rhea Klanšek is an applied neuroscientist in the field of brain-computer interfaces, currently founding a startup for ocular biosensors and brain data visualizations. What led her into the field is the mission to create a future with superpowers. Innovations and applied neuroscience technology are paving the way, making her dream a reality. Her dream as a child was to read people's minds, after all. At age 6, she created her first business, a lemonade stand. At age 11, she was working on business plans. She has successfully self-published a history of American comics on Kickstarter to fund her volunteering research around the world. She traveled from Peru, Thailand, Cambodia, Ecuador, India, South Africa. Rhea is a founder of NEURO-BOOTCAMP, a specialized curriculum on neuroscience applications to bring innovation out of the lab and into the real world. As an American Slovenian Education Foundation Fellow, ASIF, she will research at the University of Wyoming in the United States the biomedical signal processing, sensor fusion, and virtual reality research. Rhea also received the Obama's Presidential Academic Excellence Award. Her research on neuromarketing data made her a finalist for Science Breakthrough on 2020 at the Falling Walls and Berlin Science Week Conference. She also won the first place at the Innovative All-Nighter Hackathon in Slovenia, and also achieved top 5 NASA Space Challenge in 2015 with team volunteer work in epilab.c. In her discussion today of the transition from academia to entrepreneurship, neuroscience, she will explain the following 3 areas. How to cultivate an entrepreneurial mindset early. How to combine science, art, and business. What we can do to create an environment for innovation. But before that, I'd like to hear a little bit more about your working on business plans at age 11, overcoming the dyslexia with comic books, and your experience as volunteer researcher around the world. And also the project on developing artificial intelligent movie trailers as a co-founder in Picasso Analytics in Dublin. So please, Rhea, the floor is all yours.
Matea, thank you so much for such a wonderful introduction and for overviewing everything. I know it's quite a lot and quite diverse. It almost seems, you know, everything. But I really appreciate the Global Business Network, that we're, you know, that this community exists and that we're connecting with each other, and that there's so many Slovenes all over the world and also in Slovenia, and that these connections are being built, because from my experience and from what I value the most, these connections really do bring a lot of value. And it's part of innovation, but it's also just part of creating a better society. And I think we're so lucky to be Slovenes, because there's so many great Slovenes out there doing such amazing things and being top of the field all over the globe. So it's amazing to be part of this, and I'm really thankful to be here. Thank you. To start off with, you know, how to cultivate an entrepreneurial mindset early, and why was I working on business plans at age 11? It all has to do with my mother, which already had her own segment here, but this is my perspective in terms of what it's like to have such an amazing mentor so early in your life. The first advice that I remember her giving me is "Misel svoja glava," think your own mind, have your own thoughts. And this was already in kindergarten. So she was already, you know, prepping me to be kind of a little bit of a rebel, and to always look deeper at things. And I think that's what entrepreneurship is about, because what you're doing is you're trying to find problems that are either people don't even know that they're problems, or everybody's already given up. They're like, well, we just have to live with this. And as an entrepreneur, you take a second look, you think your own mind, and then you try to find a creative solution. So that's the core of what I meant by cultivating an entrepreneur mindset early. On the other hand, I was also really lucky that my mom is also a businesswoman and entrepreneur herself. And I was lucky enough that she basically took me when I was 7 and moved us to the US, and that I had this amazing experience of not just Slovenia, but also growing up in the US and having a little bit of a different education system. And education and business and family was all connected with us. So I switched schools pretty much every year. A lot of it was because, you know, we were figuring out what it is living in New York, what the school system is like. When you come there with, you know, basically just 2 suitcases, 2 kids, you really don't know what to expect and how to figure it out. And my mom as an entrepreneur always, you know, wasn't just satisfied with one thing, but she always pushed harder. And so me switching schools was also me learning English, for example. So the first school that I went to in America, I didn't know any English. And here another entrepreneurial aspect and, you know, mindset is that you're not always going to have all the answers before you go in. And you're not always going to understand the situation that you're put into. And you have to develop sensitivities, develop ways of understanding the world that help you figure things out quickly, test things, figure out what's working when you're testing them. And I had the ability to do that as a kid in school, because every school that I switched schools every year was different. And I had to figure out what the rules were, you know, how to get by, especially because I was, you know, I was very lucky in the way I was growing up, but I was still an immigrant at the beginning. I still had this challenge of fitting in and being from a very different background, having a language barrier in front of me, and sometimes kids can be mean. You know, we're not going to overlook that. And I managed in pretty much every school to somehow figure out how to integrate very quickly and figure out, you know, what works in the school and what doesn't. And I think as an entrepreneur, that's something that you have to, especially in my case, since I'm interested in so many different areas, I've used this skill to just kind of jump in. Okay, now I want to learn everything I can about film, and I want to see what I can do with film, what's missing, what can I somehow creatively bring to this area that hasn't been brought before. So in terms of education, I had that very just life skills in terms of how to adapt. A lot of that was my schooling. And in terms of home life was just basically business, because we were a business family. So we were, you know, at the family dinner, we were basically just talking about a lot of the times the businesses we were working on, you know, the ventures that we're currently, you know, working on. And the business plan that I corrected at 11 was my brother's business plan for, what was it for? I don't remember right now, but it was an interesting project. And what happened was that I learned English so quickly because I was a kid that they ended up just giving me these business plans and, you know, correct the English. We each had a little bit of a job, and mine was at first just to be the, you know, the last editor, just to make sure that the grammar was correct. And then because we were debating basically business plans every evening, it started becoming this natural thing. And I sometimes, I think I was quite a rude child, because when I met somebody new, and a lot of the times the people that I met because of my mom, because of my brother, were business people, I was this tiny kid and I would just go and ask them, like, but how does your business model work? Where is your where is your money coming from? How does it flow? What are your biggest costs? What's the biggest problem? Why would somebody even buy this? Like, what's your value proposition? I wasn't using those, you know, exact words. I've studied economics now, so that's why I know what these words are. But in my, you know, childhood brain, I was always trying to figure out, but how does this system work? And in terms of our family life, I think another skill that was really, you know, that I now look back on and I thought that was just brilliant, is that whenever we went into a certain business, or whenever we bought a product, or we bought something, or we went to a store, we were, you know, me and my mom would evaluate our experiences as customers. And it started at a very young age, when if I was really good, or if I somehow, you know, manipulated the situation in a way, you know, I was a very smart kid at some points. My mom would go to a petrol station in Slovenia, and she would buy me basically a toy. And we would always evaluate, how was this toy packaged, and was this packaging actually made for children? And it was always an inside joke of ours that mostly the packaging that children toys were in during that time. Now I'm not familiar because I don't really buy children's toys anymore, but during that time it was just ridiculous what they were doing. They were trying to make this like a nuclear weapon that you don't open. And it was meant for kids. So the whole, you know, experience was of being a consumer of kids' toys was, you know, quite, you know, something that we always talked about. And there was like, how would you make this more fun? And I think now that, you know, you're talking about Gen Z generations, that's something that's actually happening now with like unboxing videos, for example, being very popular on YouTube. A lot of that has come from the fact of reliving that childhood, childhood joy of getting a toy, but as an adult. And there's a neuroscience connection here that we can make, and a psychological connection, of course. But so to kind of go over everything, my mom was just really well at parenting me early on to basically challenge me to adapt to situations, figure out the systems. And then at home, we really had kind of an intensive MBA program since we were kids. So, and it wasn't and I didn't really understand what I was learning until I went and studied economics for my bachelor's. And I started to realize, oh, that's what we were, talking about. We were talking about, basically microeconomics when I was little. So I think you can do a lot as a parent, and I'm really glad with what I had in my childhood and the challenges that I had to face. Education wasn't the simplest thing for me either, because I do have dyslexia. And so I came from Slovenia, New Slovene, then went to America, went to my first school, which was an American school, went to the second school, was also American, and then the third one was British. And I just by that point had learned American spelling. And then I was put in a British school, and it was, everything was out the window, and I was again at square zero. But I think I always had this, this thing in my head, like, think your own mind and also be responsible for your own success. So there's no using excuses that you had a challenge, like the challenge is your gift. If you have a challenge, then that's your gift to overcome that and have a success and be like, I did have this thing, but I was able to be strong enough to figure out a way that works for me to get over it and to still basically be my own person and own my own life. And being, having that kind of mindset early on, I think prepared me to, to learn English, to adapt to all the different schools, to then overcome the dyslexia that I had issues with. And then I did end up getting Obama's Education Award in 8th grade. And I was really proud of that, because it was at first, when you're a kid and you come into school and you don't even know the language, they kind of label you a little bit as like, oh, are you, you're not the smartest one here, because you're really not. You don't understand half of what's going on. And to end up, having basically the American system tell me, okay, you're good, you have potential. That was a huge moment for me. And I think the lemonade stand, I think one thing I want to talk about that is the fact that I've always early on, I had my mom be the businesswoman in role model. And so for me, it was no weird thing that, women and girls can do business. It was, it was just, we're just going to do it, because why wouldn't we? It's cool, it's fun. And so my lemonade stand was all girls. So I had a team of all girls be my, I think I was the manager or something at that point, but we didn't know what we were doing, setting up the lemonade stand. But I really do find the pictures really great now, because it's okay. Early on, I really had that, didn't have that drawback or that like limit on myself that like, oh, well, I'm a woman, so that's not something for me. I was really lucky that I didn't have that early on. So, and that's continued now as well. So for example, for NEURO-BOOTCAMP, that was the summer school that I ran this August for neuroscience. I started NEURO-BOOTCAMP with a brainstorming session that I called my brainstorming session of the girl network. So I kind of contacted everybody that I knew, and it ended up being mostly women, because I'm really lucky to have really successful friends who are in very diverse areas. And I was just like, guys, do you want to come over? I'll book us a conference room. I'll buy us croissants. We'll have mango smoothies. I put little banners around that had unicorns on them, because I was like, this is for my unicorn startup. So we need the right, everything was pink. I really, wanted to have the whole experience. And then we sat down and we brainstormed a whole month of a summer school, all the marketing material, all the promotion, everything. I took a picture and I just look at it now, because that's the girl network, basically, is connecting with women around the world. And I think the, global women business leaders, the whole series that you're doing on the lectures, I think that's so amazing, because it's really nice to see even myself, who I have a really great role model. I sometimes do feel a little bit, like, I would say down, or like, I wish I saw more women in roles, because sometimes you do forget and you feel like, this is kind of weird, should I be doing this? And seeing so many good examples and role models and mentors that you can access is amazing. So I think that's a really great initiative.
Just one comment here. You were very lucky to grow up in this environment with mom. And so what about your generation, people that they don't have this background, they don't have this, my phone is ringing here, that they don't have this ability or this opportunity to have as parents, as business people. How about these people? How about these young children, young kids? How they should go now?
I think here the education is really important, because in the US, I think because the education, you know, we want all education systems to be meritocratic. The amount of effort that you put in is the reward that you receive back. And I think when I was switching schools in America, that held true, you know, because I was a new kid every year, so I had to prove myself every year, and then I was rewarded based on what I did. So that, you know, taught me feedback. But the actual education system is even more more meritocratic, to the point where it's a little bit freer than what I saw in Slovenia. Here it's, you know, because in Slovenia is very small and we all know each other, there is kind of this risk of a reputation being built up. And if you're a kid in one school, you can get a reputation early on that you're maybe not the best learner, and that can really affect you and that can shape your identity. In the US, it's a little bit different, because at least in New York, there were so many different people and so many people coming from different backgrounds, that there wasn't this reputation that kind of followed you as a kid. And you were, you know, judged more on your effort. And the schools that I went to also had really great programs where a lot of it was project learning, which I really believe in project learning as a way of teaching entrepreneurial skills early on. And the projects were structured, for example, I can compare that actually. I can compare my first year in Slovene high school to basically my first year in American high school, because I switched. So freshman year in California, and then second year of high school in Bežigrad. Both schools are the top schools of, you know, of their countries, so the US and Slovenia. And we had in both schools, I had a class that was both classes were very project oriented. So in the US, I had, what was it? I actually had business law. But the whole business law was to create your own fake startup and to argument that startup. Whereas in Slovenia, I had technology class, I think it was called, and it was supposed to be that we could develop, excuse me, that we could develop certain things based on, you know, if we wanted to do something about global warming, we could develop a global warming thing. One of the projects, for example, was to create a video, but it was very structured. It was, you know, in Slovenia, it was, you have to submit this report, and then you have to submit that report. And then if you're going to make a video, it has to be exactly like this and exactly like that. And here's the criteria based on how you're going to be judged. And there's a point system. And you know, then you need to do, if you're going to do prototyping, you need to do 3 types of prototypes, even though, and they all have to be the same, but exactly different the way the teacher tells you that they're supposed to be different. It's the way we have bureaucracy in Slovenia, that's the way that we're teaching project learning. Whereas in the US, you had more of like your end goal is success, and success can mean this or that, but there is a certain way of measuring success. It's not just anybody gets a reward, you know, there is an end goal, but you need to figure out how you're going to get there. And that means you can go ask the teacher about exactly, you know, what does the teacher think? What exactly are the criteria that the teacher might use? Can you change the teacher's perspective of the criteria as well? And you become more involved in the project work, you actually start learning. So for example, most of the skills that led me into film, for example, that led me into neuroscience, I learned a lot of them in the US, because a lot of it was through project work where I was challenged to choose my own end goal, which was usually really ambitious because I was a kid and I thought anything was possible. And then I was challenged to find my own resources to get to that goal. And that actually taught me to go ask questions, discover things, and be entrepreneurial in the terms of like, okay, I found a problem I want to solve. Let's find different ways I can solve this problem and not wait for somebody else to do it for me. So.
Okay, just one question from Sonia. Which role models, other than your mom, would you credit as inspirational for your entrepreneurial drive?
Well, if anybody's seen the movie Legally Blonde, I think that was, I didn't even know English when I saw that movie, and I think I knew it by heart and still didn't know English. So I did try to paint my whole room pink after that movie. But the movie is about a woman who's very beautiful. She's blonde and she's from an upper class Novo Riche background. And she wants to, basically, she's in love with this guy and he goes to Harvard and she wants to follow him. So she decides, I'm going to get into Harvard for a man. And she ends up working her ass off, as they say, and getting into Harvard, and then realizing once she's there that actually she has all these skills, competencies, that she's really gifted for this area, and that there's, because her type of, her demographic, her type of person isn't usually in law, there's actually a really missing niche of people who kind of need her help, and she finds that niche and she creates a successful career and is an independent businesswoman. And I decided when I saw that movie, I don't know, I was I think 6 or something, that I wanted to go to Harvard and that I wanted to be this type of person who, just is able to also help people, because a lot of the film is about her actually helping those people who are overlooked for certain reasons. And as an international kid, pretty much my whole life, I know how hard that is to, how many challenges you're faced with when you're coming into a new environment, and how there's a lack of support. And I see that a lot of that is still in Slovenia prevalent. Like, I went to an undergrad program at Ekonomska fakulteta in the international department for international business. And I really saw, I was used to in the US that you had clubs, that you had organizations, that you had things written on the website, basically basic instructions being written somewhere that you could access. And I started seeing that that wasn't available, that a lot of my classmates were confused. We, for example, didn't even know that we had student representatives that we were supposed to elect, because nobody told us. So I started just, instead of waiting to get an official permission from the school that, there should be a representative for our class, that the international class should have more say in things, that we need to get more information, that there needs to be this dialogue. If I would have waited for the school, it would have never happened. So what I decided to do is just, well, why can't I do it? If this is a problem, why can't I do something about it and be active? And I ended up making Math Squad, which was a peer-to-peer math tutoring organization that I was setting up through Facebook, and we had about 100 members, which at that point was quite a lot for me to manage. But I did end up really helping people pass the first math course, which is usually where everybody fails. So that, and then we had Statistics League and English Union. So those 3 courses were the hardest ones for first year. So kind of took that over and then kind of started getting people more involved. And I think I also held a Kickstarter workshop for some reason as well. I was like, okay, well, we're doing international business. Why don't we have a Kickstarter workshop as well?
So also Sonia comment, as you mentioned that professional role models from your generation are lacking. How do we help to promote and present them? What are the best communication channels from Gen Z, Generation Z? The best?
Well, I don't think that Gen Z has their own, role models. And this is going to be controversial, but I do think that the Kardashians are one of them. People love to criticize them. There's definitely a lot of things that we can criticize them for, but we do have to remember that they did build an empire and that they're multiple billionaires. And a lot of that has to do with really strategic business thinking in the background. And since they're a family of women, multiple generations of women as well working together, and they haven't, you know, killed each other at this point, that's an amazing, you know, that is an amazing case. And I think Gen Z in certain ways has these role models on Instagram, on TikTok, and, you know, for example, the Kardashians are them. What I think, you know, the problem is that we're not talking about the Kardashians as business cases. We're not. We're just criticizing them as women who, you know, we're criticizing them. Exactly. Whereas we could really be talking about, you know, I know too much about this because in the US, we did have a period where, like everybody else, we were watching the Kardashians. So this is why this stuck with me. But, you know, the fact that they were able to learn and to create this kind of influencer network and media empire as well, if you think of E as being part of their network. And we're not talking about it at all. And we're not saying that that's smart, and we're not, you know, and in the other, there's a lot of, I think we have with Gen Z, we have this risk that we're doing with the cancel culture as well, where we're really liking to cancel people because of one thing in their life, but we're not evaluating everything else that they've done. And here, I'm going to say that there are some certain people that I completely agree that need to be canceled. You know, I'm not going to be defending everybody. I'm not Queen Mary or something, but I do think that we need to start, you know, to start giving the younger generation and to start the discussion with the younger generation as more holistic, as like Kim Kardashian isn't just an influencer, she's also a business god in terms of how everything is structured and the way that that family works. And because influencers are so prominent in their lives, to give them the option to talk about it from this perspective, not just from media consumption perspective and from fashion, for example, perspective, but also from a business perspective. How does all of these things work? Because in the end, a lot of businesses are facing a digital marketing crisis. You know, how to get followers, how to promote things on social media, how to get young people to like what you post. Because that's what I hear a lot. Oh, you're a young person. Help me fix my social media. How do I make them like this? And how do I get more followers? We need to kind of integrate also to teach the younger generation that the media that they're consuming is also a product and it's also a business model, and that they can learn a lot from just consuming it in terms of what they can do in the future. Does that wrap up?
So we would like to hear more now about neuro. Tell us a little bit about the part where you developed the brain dictionary.
Right. So I think here we get into the second topic, which is how to combine science, art, and business. And I think it does touch on what I was just saying, that there's a real, not a real problem, but, you know, in a missed opportunity to be multidisciplinary when you're talking about something. And I think with how Gen Z, for example, is learning and the way that they're accessing information through social media, we do need to make, you know, we do need to make science, for example, also art and also business. And we need to make business also connected more to science and more to art, and then art for, you know, in the same way, that this triangle has to be more interconnected, and that these fields have to have professionals that are multidisciplinary. So I, for example, was studying business, but I'd always loved film. A lot of it came from the fact that I did have dyslexia, and that for me, learning English, a lot of it was done through movies. So I was always an avid movies fan, especially science fiction. Obviously, if I wanted to read people's minds, I loved science fiction the most. And I started reading because of comic books. So I even then started creating my own and published my own. And during my studies for business, I really wanted to learn more about the film industry. So I decided to go to film school for one summer to a very intensive program, which was at the end, you had to create 12 short films, which for anybody who's ever actually worked on a film, and on a set, that's like impossible in terms of the amount of time that we had. But we did it by basically not sleeping for a couple of weeks. But it was a really great program, and I learned so much, and I really connected with people there. And when you're in a group of people who each has their own project that they want to complete, and you're there kind of to support each other, there's a culture, if you have the right people, there's this type of culture of doing that kind of develops, and you start to really brainstorm together in so many deeper and broader ways than you maybe do with friends where you just have drinks, and some of my best friends in life come from groups where we were working together first with our own, and not a group project. I mean, we had our own projects, but we were working in the same environment. And so during film school, we started really talking about, we were constantly evaluating film language because we were actually filming and creating films. So we were constantly in this creation, but also critique mindset. And a lot of filmmaking and the editing process of once you have something shot, you really talk about what it means, what film language means and how you're communicating, and how a few seconds can change the meaning of a whole piece. And we were thinking, how we were kind of criticizing film trailers at that point, because film trailers had become so mass produced that each one was pretty much the same. And it had the same elements, the same type of language. You could even map all of them together. And there's actually really great YouTube analysis that recently just came out that actually just does that. It just maps you how each trailer is actually the same. And it's just using a little bit different music and a little bit of different shots from different films, but it's the same. So we were like, that's very interesting, because we have such a huge, not a huge, but in terms of film, a pretty good data set here. Could we maybe teach a computer, an AI to do this? And so I decided, from this crazy idea, we really developed it further. We decided that after we finished our bachelor degrees that we would go to Dublin and we would try to make this startup. And that's what I was doing there. And we got pretty far. We were connected with Trinity College at that point, and also we were going to talk to IBM Research Center, but then COVID shut everything down. So we were like, okay, for 2 weeks, we'll go back to our home countries, we'll wait it out, and then we'll come back. And everybody here knows that it wasn't 2 weeks. So I ended up starting to, go through my network in Slovenia and try to figure out what I could do while I was here, while I was waiting for everything to calm down and everybody was trying to figure out what was happening. And my colleagues from Epileptica C told me about Black Box Applied Neuroscience. And the situation there was that basically Black Box was focused on neuromarketing measurements, which are measurements of video advertisements while they measured EEG, which is brain data, and eye tracking, which is eye data. And they couldn't ethically do that because of COVID restrictions. So they started looking into their historical data. And what they had was a treasure trove of 7 years of neuromarketing data done on over 1,000 advertisements. And with 30 participants pretty much being measured for each, so about 30,000 data measurements in the end. And I came in basically proposing from my study in Picasso Analytics, what we were doing with film trailers with movie language was to look at advertisements, because a trailer is just an advertisement for a movie. And so advertisements themselves also have structure. And I did in fact learn about this and had a really amazing teacher in Prague Film School that he was the cinematographer for pretty much all the beer commercials and for quite a few high-end car brands. So he really told us the ins and outs of cinematography of advertisements. And I was able to call him and also ask a little bit about how does that work for just general, how does advertisements and the structure of that work. And so then we ended up analyzing the data sets and looking at specific elements that were in the advertisements. And if we could somehow map that back to the brain data, exactly how to annotate that and how to create a model that we could maybe see in broad terms, benchmarking analysis for certain elements in advertisements. So if you were using this element in your advertisement, could we predict what kind of reaction that would really have? And we got pretty far. We also started discovering that, EEG data, for example, is very noisy, as we say, or it has a lot of artifacts. But the process of cleaning can sometimes also take a lot of the data, a lot of the information out of the data. So we started here applying entropy models to see if we could somehow find the way that the brain was self-organizing itself, and if we could figure that out from the data that we had. We were really lucky with Falling Walls because the project was, it was a dream project. We had the data, but we really wanted to push the boundaries of what we were able to do. And so we also pitched the project mostly just to get more feedback, to show them where we were at and to get more perspectives on it and to get more professionals who had maybe seen similar things to tell us what we were going in. But what ended up happening is that we had the interviews, we had a couple of experts come to us, tell us advice, but we also had people just really falling in love with the project and being like, oh my God, you have this data set, what are you doing? And that's how we basically became finalists for 2020. It was because of that, because, in neuromarketing research, it is quite rare that you have such a data set. So we were really lucky in terms of how we were going, and also in terms of brain dynamics, in terms of how the brain is self-organized. There's huge research that's coming out right now. So it's something that's really evolving, and we were just on the pinnacle of that. So the project is still, though, ongoing. So it's definitely, there's definitely some things that are going to come out. And I think advertisements are really interesting because of the way the film language is structured. So that's also my perspective from film. Yeah.
Let me just read one comment that Mr. John Bommer made, that he agrees with you taking the academia part of your life and sharing it with us. The application of science is very important. Therefore, I applaud you for taking academia to mainstream. This was his comment. And before Jasna commented that she had issues in Brzezigrajska school, so that's why she went to United States to study.
Can I just comment something? So Sonia, were you the one that said thank you for the academia mainstream?
John,
I think another John. Okay, sorry, the chat is a bit confusing. John, yeah, I think again I have to applaud my mother here because she gave both me and my brother kind of a challenge. She never stopped educating herself. I think anyone who's seen her talk probably she touched on that as well. And obviously, like when I was very young, she went to Harvard. And so one of the stories that I love mentioning is that I never had bedtime stories. I had her Harvard business cases as my bedtime stories because she was studying while she was also putting me to sleep. And I think that some of that hopefully stayed with me in my subconscious. But she gave us a challenge that you have to, that it's kind of a competition, that you should try to be more educated than me, because that's kind of the goal of the next generation, is to kind of push further, and especially with education and how the past years the history has gone. We're really lucky in Slovenia to have such a high population of educated people and to have this kind of culture of being educated, and to have such good researchers also that are, you know, not just in Slovenia, but that are all over the world. We have really great researchers. The organization ASA, for example, is doing really great work with connecting this community together and giving Slovene students opportunities to go abroad. But yeah, there was a challenge with my mom. And so, for example, why I'm doing about double masters is because I know that she has 3 and I'm just trying to get to the 4th one as fast as I can. But that's a, you know, that's a lifetime goal there. And now she's doing a PhD, so I have to hurry up. I have to get a PhD soon.
You only have 24, please.
Yeah, Rhea, I do want to say that, you know, my comment is that it's great that you're taking the applied approach. I find too many people in academia have all these great ideas they put on the shelf and never really apply it. So that's extremely important. My daughter just finished her doctorate recently, and you know, it's in the food nutrition and the legumes and pulses. And you know, I said to her, and I think one of the professors out of the United States, you know, challenged her, you know, to say, hey, help me to get this out on Main Street. And I think, you know, I think that's great that you're doing that. And I look forward to, you know, hearing more about you and all the other doctors on this presentation here. I'm sure there's many of them that are here, and you know, it's fantastic. And it's great as women. I have to say, in our firm, we're a bunch of accountants, so business plans are a big part of us. And often my kids had no problem sleeping at night when I talked about accounting. But you know, the thing with women that's really important, and I'll just say a little quick piece, is we have several women they're young and they're having families. And I just seem to find that women, when they decide to have families, they have no way of coming back and they get overwhelmed coming back. And what we're doing here as a firm, we're encouraging them to come back, says, hey, don't feel overwhelmed, just take bite-sized pieces. I think you touched on that, and I think that's important for all women to understand, because you know, they have a lot to contribute in the world, and it's a shame when they decide when they have families that they no longer can contribute. But anyways, just my 2 cents. Thank you.
I think that's a really great point, and thank you for both of them for, you know, how to include more women in the workforce after family, and also to bring science into the real world. I think both of those are really, really good missions, and they're part of my life as well. So thank you so much for highlighting them.
Just one question from Jasna. What matters most in upskilling? Hard skills or soft skills, or combination of both?
Oh, I mean, I would say that it's in terms of balance, because both hard skills and soft skills are helping you grow, and the point is for you to grow and become better. But I think emphasizing soft skills is I think it's really important, because I think from my experience, because again, I was an international and I saw how hard it is, and it's hard, but a lot of the times if somebody hasn't gone through your experience, they don't understand it and they don't know that they can do anything to help you. And soft skills a lot of the time can be taught to a certain extent, but you also have to struggle and have a challenge for you to really adopt those soft skills as well. That's my personal opinion here. And so I also think if more scientists had soft skills, we would have more innovation, just because they would know how to talk to each other. So that's just my point of view. But I think hard skills are also very important. So both of them balanced. And the point is the fact that you should be growing and that you should be challenging yourself. So if you're somebody who's naturally an extrovert, but you're maybe not, you know, you want to know more about programming, then obviously you would focus on that. So it does depend on your context and where you're coming from and what your goals are. But it's a really great question, Jasna. Thank you.
Just maybe a comment from my end, because initially I'm coaching early stage startups, technical founders, how to launch. And it looked as if it's a hard skill problem, you know, how to do a business plan, but it's actually 80% it's a soft skill problem. And the same goes with doing your digital identity. So I was kind of like it took me quite a few years to figure that out. So I do vote for the soft skills. Yeah,
I would add to you, I honestly think that we need to start connecting scientists, researchers, and people who are very, focused and niche in terms of academia and research with young business entrepreneurs who are maybe even still learning, entrepreneurship in university, because the researchers and let's say the tech guys, they're approaching the problem in a certain way. They're usually approaching it with like, what is the history of the research? What's the literature review? What's the mechanics? What are the rules? What are the theories? And okay, I'm just going to build on that. And business here and creating products for consumers and finding a market is all about actually looking at, talking to consumers and finding out a problem and then finding the solution. And a lot of the times these two areas are synergetic, they, connect, and you find really great innovations. And that's what's hopefully now neuroscience is coming out more out of the lab, that we can have more, more of these consumer facing approach to finding solutions and innovation. But we need to bring these people together more, because they're approaching problems in opposite directions, and we need to bring them together in the middle, because that's basically the key to innovation, in my opinion. So it's a really great point.
Yeah, maybe just one comment for the end. It's exactly what you're saying. I'm running these cohort-based courses and to coach people how to position themselves. And in the last cohort, I had a Gen Z, a TikToker, a really famous TikToker in Slovenia. Oh, nice. And he's doing actually quite well. And it was a different dynamics, because I had this older folks, generation X, and then Y, and then this Gen Z. So it's learning from each other. And I see people for much better when it's a mixture of science, engineers, artists. Actually, that's why I'm running the mixed cohorts. I don't want to kind of like niche down and say, oh, I just want to do it for B2B founders or something. So it's exactly what you were saying. I actually experiment-wise tested it to push each other forward. So it definitely works on a small scale.
Good luck with it, because I think that's exactly what we need, is to have, because one thing is what you can give as a lecturer. I noticed that and I've known that before, but I really noticed it now running my own summer school, is that I could only as a lecturer do so much. But if I was able to create a good group of people to be together, then the group itself, the culture that builds in there, actually creates the learning that I wanted to create. And it's not just about me, it's also the group dynamic of the learners together. And I think, I think there's always, because I switched so many schools again, we're going back to the same things. I did notice that the way that I, interacted within a group changed the outcomes for everybody. So there's a lot that you can do on an individual level when you're in a space, when you're with other people, to create a better environment both for yourself and for everybody else. And I think if you have that kind of mindset that you not just, I'm just going to get a best 10, I'm going to get the best grade for me, but to also figure out how can I kind of do it so that we're all included in this. Maybe that's a perspective that sometimes is missing in entrepreneurship, because it's very individualized. Sometimes, I want to be a billionaire. And it's not, that's usually the saying, I want to be Mark Zuckerberg, I want to be Steve Jobs, which is usually one person. We should maybe be thinking about how to create companies, and companies are a group of people where everybody's succeeding and growing. So that's also something that I thought of. But really great project, and I really hope to hear more about it, because I think it's perfect.
Polona has a question. Polona, please.
Hi, I actually have a question, actually more like as a comment, because what I see now in academia, especially in healthcare, is that there is an opposite effect. There's a lot of people that want to open their new companies and startups, And not only that, actually, what is happening right now is that when you apply to different grants, you always need to include how your science is applicable. And this actually forms a little bit complicated situation, because you see, in science, a basic research is very, very much needed. Like for pharmaceutical companies, they are developing new treatments according to the basic science. So if there is no basic science, it's going to be a problem to make actually new drugs, new treatments, and so on. So now academia was the main source of basic science, because it's very expensive, it's very long, it takes a long time to understand the biology of certain disease. And therefore, a pharmaceutical company has no interest. They usually just source the knowledge from academia. Now, if there are grants for academia that are only like having this applicable science, so we have to now suddenly also find possible, like let's say, treatment options. Like it always has to have some kind of application that could be translated into business. It gets actually quite complicated to do our basic research. And therefore, I am actually a little bit worried about long-term goal of being too much entrepreneurial, like in certain way, if you know what I mean. So I think there has to be a balance. And I believe that we will have to think as a future generation about how to maybe separate academia from pharmaceutical companies and keep academia as is, and maybe make some kind of different transition in the academia or something. Because also, if you develop a therapy in academia, you publish a paper, and therefore you cannot make a patent on that, and you cannot make a drug, as well as pharmaceutical company cannot pick up this as a new treatment option because it was published in a paper. So therefore, no one can really take an action on this basically on this research or on this discovery. So it becomes a little bit a problematic topic that we should also think about as a future generation. So
I think what you brought up, there was a lot of really good points, and I agree with you. There is definitely also a problem with academia, and that the way that they're rewarding researchers, and the way that, for example, journal articles and the journals themselves, as someone who studied economics, that's a basics. The way it's structured right now, it's a basic monopoly. And why are we distributing science through a monopoly system? Isn't science supposed to be open access? Shouldn't nobody be the gatekeeper? Shouldn't some, and I think for example, the European Union now is really focusing with, I think, the New Horizon goals, and where Europe is going to develop next is on creating more open science. So, getting rid of these barriers that we have, especially with journal articles and with access, to create this better flow of information from one field to the other. And there's definitely a lot that you can, in terms of basic science, I definitely agree with you that there still has to be a lot more research done, especially in neuroscience as well. But in neuroscience, we have a different kind of situation than maybe health, because health, for example, if you do find something and it's market valuable, you still have a huge process to get it on market because of the regulations and the bureaucracy around the health sector that's really does stifle and create these market imbalances inside of it. In neuroscience, for example, we were really lucky that in 2013, Obama launched the brain initiative to map the brain and put over $1 billion of funding from the US government into grants that were just basically building up basic research. And the European Union then created the Human Brain Initiative project. And they also invested $1 billion. They're kind of competing with each other, honestly. And then China also did it. So, but in terms of neuroscience, we have quite a lot of access to grants. What the problem is that you need to have a huge academic career behind you to be able to do this type of research, which limits this cross-disciplinary of someone coming from maybe an art background and studying neuroscience, because there's a lot. Neuroscience is about studying people. It's about studying what it means to be human. What is the brain? Why are we like this? And what is consciousness? How are we even able to basically understand that we're living things and have power in our lives and have effect? And that isn't just, neuroscience programs are usually very limited in the way that they're teaching you this, and it's from a medical perspective, which is, key. We need medicine here, and we need a medical perspective in the anatomy and everything. But the actual concepts of what we're trying to understand need to be broader. And that's why, in terms of neuroscience, I do believe that it's very great that we do have these businesses and these companies coming in, like Neuralink and Kernel, for example, which are private owned companies that are developing technology that was too expensive for academia to develop. And they are now trying to figure out how we can all interact with the science in our daily lives, just because neuroscience has a huge part to do with our daily lives. It's trying to study basically what makes us us. So that's why we do need to bring neuroscience in terms of out of the lab and into the real world, to also be able to expand on the basic research that's being done, and to include areas that in academia are maybe looked down upon. So for example, in my summer school, the first lecture that we had was neuropsychic, which was Siddharth Ramakrishnan, a neuroscientist from Puget Sound in the US, a very great university. He's studying zebrafish, I think, and actual neuron linkage models, and he's simulating certain synapse connections. But the way that he's trying to teach people about what he's doing in the lab is to tell them how tarot card reading can teach you more about your subconscious thought process, and how you can actually train intuitive thinking using tarot cards. So he's combining these two different areas, and you see people who, I really, we have a lot of different facets of human nature, and one of them is spirituality and psychicism. And that has to do with neuroscience, the way our brain is wired, what's happening, and also what we still don't understand about the whole process. And including those two areas together, you're getting different people to be talking about the same thing, and you're also teaching more people about it, and hopefully that will make more brains be involved in figuring out what is the brain. That's the whole point.
There was a question also from Tara. Would you like to ask yourself? There's a long text. Tara?
Hi, yes, I'm sorry. My connection is so bad. I can't put the video on right now. You can also hear a very noisy street in the background because I have not yet closed my window. So yes, my question relates to successful. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hello? Yeah, okay. So yeah, you're very young and successful, and I wonder, did you ever have experience as a woman that it might be easier to work with men than women, in terms of, women can sometimes be jealous, and instead of supporting each other, they put each other down, make unnecessary obstacles. So can you maybe share your experience on doing, like, how do you do business with women? What are the tricks and tips to it, let's say? I also referred in my question to your favorite movie, where it's evident that at the end, Emmett is her biggest supporter and not her besties. So, what is your take on that? Thank you.
Well, first, it's been a very long time since I saw Legally Blonde, so I'm gonna have to skip the question about that, because I'm gonna go rewatch the movie this evening to really figure out exactly that. But in terms of working with women, I never had a problem. And I think I was really lucky because I had a very strong female role model in my mom. And I wasn't, she our relationship as mother and daughter was very respectful, and we never had issues in terms of that, the typical issues that you have. So I think a lot of the times with working with women, and this is completely my experience, the times that I had any type of issue, which weren't common, but it was a lot of the times I would ask, you know, how was your relationship with your mom? And if the relationship with her own mom wasn't very well, if it was very antagonistic, some of that transferred to working together. That's just my like rule of thumb in terms of that. But in terms of working as a woman and working with women and men, I actually usually feel more comfortable with women, because if we're all women, it's usually not that we're all women, it's usually more like we're all just here to do something together, and the gender doesn't really matter. That's usually how it, in terms of my experience, is that usually how it works. When you're working with men, I come with the same attitude. We're just two people, or we're just a group of people trying to do things together. And then I start realizing that me being, for example, direct, and for me actually, you know, wanting this project to be done. And now I have the Slovene word stuck in my head, zahtevat, not demanding, but asking that people do their part. That sometimes with men, that becomes kind of a very situation where it's, you know, the gender then becomes really apparent, because you're a woman, you shouldn't be telling me what to do. And also, usually I'm also younger, so I have that problem of, you're a younger woman telling an older man what to do. And so I usually have, in terms of gender, I have more problems with me feeling my own gender when I'm working with men. But then on the other hand, I think you don't work with the two genders the same way. So with women, there is a certain way of, you know, of approaching the discussion, and a lot of the time you get the most productive things done during a coffee break with women. You go to coffee, you talk about everything, and then it's done. You have the whole to-do list for the whole week done, and you know what you're doing. And with mine, it's a bit more different. There's usually meetings and that kind of thing. But also, I think I'm very young here, and I think the generations are very different. And I really want to see how it is in the future with Gen Z, for example, and what kind of, you know, with these generations that are being basically raised with social media and being raised online, the gender and social issues that they're being exposed to and that they're talking about are pretty advanced. If you think about, you know, young people talking about global warming and the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter, and them being actually more engaged than I think than even my generation was. And my generation started being really engaged. But I think that the younger generation is going to teach us a lot more in terms of gender and working together and how those two things interplay.
Okay, thank you so much for the answer.
Sorry. Thank you, Tara. We don't want to finish this conversation with you. It's so much to talk about it. I know that we went a little bit off the path, but I really want to ask you if there's anything else that you would like to emphasize, if there's anything else that you want to really tell us about, more about your neuro bootcamp, your new projects, all connecting neuroscience.
Okay. Yeah, of course. First of all, really thank you everybody for taking the time to attend today and to listen, and for the questions that you posed, because I think I really like hearing what people want to ask, because that's, you know, again, an entrepreneur, you kind of want to know what your market is. And in terms of the Global Business Network, I think these types of organizations are really important. And I think connecting Slovenes all over the world is a really also rewarding, I think, because there's just so many amazing people out there doing amazing things, and they happen to be Slovene a lot of the time. So these, this initiative is really important, and I'm really thankful to be here. In terms of my work, mostly I'm focusing on neuroscience because I do want to create a future with superpowers. I grew up, basically watching science fiction movies and reading comic books, and I want to create that sense of joy that I had as a kid, where anything was possible. And now with neuroscience technology, we're coming there. So brain-computer interfaces, what we're, developing in terms of what you can do just with your brain waves, for example, controlling things with your mind. Those things are becoming a reality, and I think the space is rapidly improving, especially with what I mentioned, private companies coming into neuroscience and developing the technology that kind of has been too expensive to develop so far. But my mission, again, coming back to comic books, is if the most famous quote from any superhero movie is, "With great power comes great responsibility." And I found that with neuroscience, there is this risk. With any technology, there's this risk where the science kind of outruns our understanding of what's happening. And it's developing too fast for us to understand what the ethical implications of what it's really impacting. And so I do balance that with also creating a platform where people can ask these questions and can debate about, what does it mean that for example, a lot of the times when we're doing EEG research, a lot of people thought that the actual technology that they put on their head, that it was affecting their brain, for example. And there's this kind of stigma of like, I don't want to put this on because it's going to read my thoughts. And so I really find a passion in communicating with people and talking about, what's possible, what's been done, what we want to do, and why we want to do it in a certain way so that we're ethical through the whole process and that we have an impact that's really beneficial for everybody. So if any of you are interested in neuroscience or, want to ever talk about any types of themes, definitely connect with me. We're also going to be launching a few more programs like NEURO-BOOTCAMP that we had this August in the future. So, follow us on social media. But yeah, definitely one of them is the development of superpowers, and the other one is the education of what those superpowers can do and what we need to be aware of. And that's what I want to do in the future.
Perfect. So Alexandre Gonçalves, would you like to make a comment? You just wrote something.
Yeah, this was just a comment on what Paloma just said. And yeah, it's a different point of view, because she was saying about basic science and the cost of basic science. And the cost of basic science is very high, and it's always funded by the state. It's public money that is funding basic science. And so if it is public money, then this should be the other way around. Then maybe these startup company that is coming out now, maybe they should be state-owned. It's just a different point
just
of view.
a thought. I mean, you have a point to make there, honestly. And that is one of the ethical issues with neuroscience as well. One of the problems is the data. It's not even the technology itself that's being developed, but it's the data collection. And, the data collection, is it all right that these private companies have all this data and potentially have all these breakthroughs, but it's not in their interest, for example, because they're private companies and their main bottom line is profit, to do that type of research. And so they usually don't do that type of research. And so we're being kind of withheld from maybe discoveries that are already potentially out there. It just the research hasn't been done. And also the data itself, in terms of neuroscience, it's a very interesting topic. And there's there's kind of a field of it called cognitive capitalism, how our actual thoughts, and now in terms of how big data is being used to affect our behavior, how that actually is a type of brainwashing, and should private companies be doing this, for example. So what you brought up is a really important topic to be talked about. On the other hand, I think private and public funding, I still think that in some ways private institutions are much more economic and much more well organized. And I also have a tiny bit of, you know, that entrepreneurial mindset where you're finding problems and you're finding inefficiencies. You will never get to the bottom of it if you start going with academia and how science is funded, because there's just so many inefficiencies with the way that system also works. And sometimes you really do need private companies to come in just because of the efficiency that private companies have. But the whole thing, there's no answer to this. And that's something that we have to, as a society, kind of talk about, because we are coming to a point where these issues need to be solved, just with how complex everything is getting and what we're actually dealing with. We're really lucky that up until this point, we haven't had such huge disasters come from these types of decisions, but we are constantly getting closer to jumping off a cliff. And I think that's the important part with getting more people involved and getting people, normal people who aren't involved in science, to also care about what's happening in science. Because we need to challenge, you know, we're a society and we're all, we can vote, for example, we can support parties. And if we don't know why we're voting, and if we don't know what the issues are, then we can't make informed decisions and we can't be empowered. So that's why the whole point is just to include more people in the discussion. But really great question. And it's a never-ending topic of discussion.
Thank you, everyone. Anyone else has a comment or would like to add anything? Also, Mr. Stefan Schale is giving congrats and great and useful discussion, and regarding regards from Santa Monica, where he's at now. And Sonia is saying that you are going to be, that you're an influencer and will continue to be a role model. And she's congratulating you. And,
thank you.
We hope we're gonna have the Gen Z as like you, né? As role models, as you. You're an inspiration, great inspiration. Thank you very much for sharing these inspiring stories, very useful informations. And I hope the whole generation today here will take something out of this conversation. We wish you great success, and although you're very busy with masters and research and doing schooling and doing your startups and building your own business, we hope you succeed, and that maybe in the future we meet again, maybe in 5 or 10 years from now. And I hope and I look forward to that meeting just to see how far you've come. And it's very inspiring, and it's again very important to have this kind of topics and discussions with Generation Z as well. So thank you, Rhea, and thank you, Luchka, your mom. She's a great, big inspiration for me as well. And I'm very happy that I met this family, and hopefully eventually I'm gonna meet your brother. He's a very big, successful man himself as well. So thank you all for coming, and very, very inspiring stories.
Thank you, Matea. And thank you, everybody else. Yeah, it's really, yeah.
No, the
it's
contacts
just,
I've already shared to everybody so they can directly contact you.
okay. Well, since we're all coming from everywhere, I hope everybody has a good morning, good midday, and good evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for supporting me. This is also a type of support, and If there's ever any way to collaborate with you guys, please just let me know and connect with me. Feel free.
Maya, I like your way too, indeed.
Okay.
It's hard to say goodbye, though.
Yeah.
How could we go on and on? But yeah, really, it's amazing, and I just hope that we didn't miss anything. That we
No.
left anything out. Okay.
No, I think this was really great, and I really like the questions. It's a lot to think about, and it's a lot of different topics that were covered. So thank you so much for this. And so I guess
they were interacting a lot, so it was a good thing. And also Sonia, she wrote something here that I heard that you will be a catalyst to integrating the different sectors of academia, science and business. We look forward to your future endeavors. Gen Z is in good hands. I completely agree.
that's a really nice comment. Thank you.
It's amazing.
Oh, thank you so much, Eva, as well. Thank you for the message. It's really beautiful.
Eva works on oil and gas fields. So
wow.
she's responsible for she works on the reservoir, and she measures exactly the amount of, you will see in the next session.
No, now I'm letting you hanging, Matea.
I'm already doing the public. I'm already promoting your next event.
Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, do come. Warmly invited. I already texted you on LinkedIn, but I guess you will be overwhelmed now.
Oh, I just looked at my phone when all the notifications. Yeah.
Are you based in Ljubljana otherwise?
Yeah. Right now I'm in Technološki Park. I'm in an incubator for my startup. And that's why I was talking so much about having different people together, because in this incubator were people from, I think I'm the only one from tech, and everybody else is from very different consumer markets. And we're helping each other so much. There's so many synergies and so many things that you find out from people. So we're honestly getting more out of just being with each other in this co-working space than from the actual workshops that they're giving us. So yeah, it's a really great experience. And I love being in Ljubljana. I really appreciate Slovenia. After COVID, even more, because I saw, what was happening in Dublin, for example. And I was so happy to be able to come back to Slovenia and be somewhere safe and in an environment that, in Slovenia, we're very lucky because we really do take care of the people. We can do it a lot better. Obviously, there's always something to improve, but it's a beautiful, Ljubljana is a beautiful city, and Slovenia is a beautiful country, and I'm really happy to be here. All right, so I'm gonna have to go. But Matea, thank you again. Really, this was an amazing experience. Oh, you're muted.
For anything, I'm gonna send you a list of contacts that we had. So if you want to also send your direct contacts to them, you're welcome to do it. So
great, thank you. It's really well organized, honestly, and it's so nice to, that you have all this prepared. And I know from running my own summer school how much work that is. So I really appreciate you, taking the time and doing everything and connecting all of us, because that's the best part of the whole network, is this connection.
Exactly.
Anyway,
this is the thing that we have to do. We have to share the amazing, interesting, inspiring stories all over the world, not just to Slovenian communities, but everywhere. So if we can be a big help to connect you to outside the world, even though you're very worldwide already. But if we can do this, the connection and this help, we're very glad to and happy to do it. Okay, so go back to your studies and work you have to do, and we talk soon.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.